I was trying to see how I could stretch out what I was going to present today into a full hour. Now I've got an hour and 5 minutes to deal with. Well, I hope our other guests show up, because this would be valuable information for them, I think. They might enjoy it. This time of the month, or whenever we have our Eden Point 10-day health camp, reconditioning, lifestyle exponences, we gear the Sabbath program around health, with a health emphasis. We're going to have an all-raw meal after lunch, after church for potluck. You're all invited, but bring something raw. And we had a rainbow breakfast again this morning. How'd you like it? My dish was beautiful. You enjoy that? All natural, all those colors. I wanted to point out some of the benefits of breathing today. Anybody found that valuable to you? As we watched one presentation, it was about, what happens when you lose weight? Where does it go? His conclusion was, if you want to lose weight, not all of us want to lose weight, but if you want to lose weight, move more, eat less, and keep breathing. Because it turns out the weight in terms of molecules and the grams of material that go out of our body goes out in what we breathe, primarily carbon dioxide. That's where the weight is. That was a surprise. So you want to keep breathing. And so I'm treading water here. Try to start at 10:30. Some folks might join us at 10:30. So I don't want to get a real fast start coming on. How many we got online now? Oh, I don't know if they can hear me. Okay, I'm ready to start. I've got my remote. I'll do it. Oh. That's fine. That's fine. There's nothing up there yet. Okay.
It's not actually a slide that has writings, but it's blank.
Why is it doing that? Here it comes. Okay. Something gets lost in translation. I did this in Keynote on a MacBook, and I had all kinds of really nice effects, and this cloud came out, and breath of life. I wanted to have that. Well, when you translate it and export it to PowerPoint, it just quite didn't have the same thing. And I tried hooking it up so I could show it through the laptop, but then the colors were all wrong. You can't win. But you'll get the message. The breath of life. Where's the breath of life begin? In the Bible, we got to go back to Genesis, don't we? Genesis chapter 2. Chapter 1 details what happens each day, but chapter 2 we get a little more back scene information about how man was actually made. And starting in verse 7, it says, God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. There we go. Verse 7. And he became a living soul. And of course, we like to point out that he wasn't given a living soul. He became a living soul. It takes all those ingredients. What are the ingredients? We got the dust of the ground, which this morning we reviewed the healing of the blind man, the man born blind. And Jesus formed clay of the dust of the ground with saliva, spit from his mouth, formed the clay. So man was formed of the dust of the ground. And we are 74% water. So there's a lot of water involved in this. Water and dust of the ground. That's what I like to say is the hardware. We can understand this a whole lot more in our modern age. That we understand computers, and perhaps some of you have even tinkered with computers, taken them apart, put a card in, take one out, replace a power supply. That's the hardware. But it doesn't run. You can plug it in, you can turn it on, but unless there is software to tell that hardware what to do, nothing happens. So the breath of life was breathed into man. He became a living soul. Now there's three ingredients that's very important to life. We've already talked about water and light in the very beginning. If you don't have light, what would we be without on this earth? You could live in a cave and with the lights out, but what are you going to eat? All food comes from light, requires light for vegetation to grow. And you have the water and the light, and it produces oxygen for us, the air. That's convenient, very nice arrangement. And so the sunlight and the water and the air, well, clouds up in the air, but you get the idea, are important to us for vegetation and hydration and oxygenation. And you got to breathe. Keep breathing every chance you get. We're going to look at some of the consequences of what happens when you stop breathing, if you don't breathe, or if you don't breathe deep enough, or you don't get enough oxygen when you are breathing. So this provides for us eating, drinking, and breathing. You can go weeks without eating, days without drinking, and minutes without breathing. Only minutes. Hypoxia is a description of conditions when our body does not have enough oxygen in it. You don't want to be hypoxic. You want enough oxygen. And it's measured in one or two different ways. The partial pressure of ambient oxygen. That means the pressure in the air. It has to do with where we might be living on Earth. If you're down close to sea level, you got more pressure than if you're up on a tall mountain. And on the way up that mountain, you know, your ears pop as it's getting used to less and less pressure. And when you come back down, they pop again as you get used to more and more pressure. So the partial pressure of oxygen is important to how much force is around whatever oxygen you've got in the air to push that into your cells, the red blood cells, so they can get oxygen. Pressure is important. And the little PO2, that's the abbreviation for partial pressure of oxygen. Then there is the percent of saturation. How much of your hemoglobin inside the red blood cells can be saturated with the oxygen that's available. If you don't have much oxygen in the air, or if you don't have enough hemoglobin, maybe you're anemic, or if you've got lung disease and that little thin membrane between the outside and the inside is thickened and the air can't get through it so well, like emphysema, chronic lung disease, pulmonary fibrosis, or fluid in between, and heart failure, pulmonary edema, that's the extreme end of heart failure. Wet lungs, you can't get the oxygen in, and you're not going to saturate very well. So hemoglobin saturation is, of course, even more important than the partial pressure out there, but it depends on that. You may have a very good PO2 environment, but if you're not saturating, that's the bottom line. So how do we measure this? Well, there's some ranges around 90 to 100. Some people say 85. Some even go down to 80. I don't know. You'd have to be you might say 80 is okay for a chronic lunger, but it's really not okay. You start feeling the effects. And I like to keep it up in the 90s for the partial pressure. Now it can go above that. You can get very high levels of oxygen and high pressures, and that'll force the oxygen in even more. But in that range is pretty good. Now, the saturation, we like to have it up in the mid to upper 90s. It starts getting down in the low 90s, we get a little concerned. If it gets down below that, you start feeling the effects as well. Here's kind of a graph that shows you how these things affect us. We operate pretty well if you can keep it up there in the 90s, 100 range. And you can't get any more than 100. That's it, 100%. You can't get more than that. Increasing brain dysfunction. In other words, you start not thinking well, can't think clearly, brain fog. You get hard time making mental calculations. Your cognitive efforts are failing. You may even start to lose consciousness. Well, eventually you will, but things are going to be in a haze. You get below 60 and the muscles don't work well. You start having muscle aches and muscle spasms, and pretty soon you get muscle paralysis. And that's really bad because you need muscles to breathe. Your diaphragm needs to work. Your intercostal muscles need to at least work. So it's downhill, all downhill from there. Here's a little illustration of the interaction between pressure and concentration. We have all these big mountains here. Everest, that's way at the top. Had you ever heard of Aconcagua? Aconcagua. I had to look that one up. It's in the Andes. It is the highest mountain in the southern hemisphere. Higher than Kilimanjaro, also in the southern hemisphere. Well, it's kind of right on the equator. I don't know whether it's above or below. That's in Kenya. But down there in the Andes, right between Argentina and Chile, is Aconcagua. And what is that? It's about 7,000 meters. That's 23,000 feet. Pretty high. Well, Everest is higher. It's about 27,000 feet something. So that's getting way up there. And we fly in jets higher than that, right? You know, they only announce it, well, we've reached our cruising altitude, 35,000 feet, whatever, 36,005. Mount Blanc in France, and I don't know where Ben Nevis is. Anybody know? It's way down there. So as you go up, you know, these people, they get into trouble up on top of Mount Everest if they don't have extra oxygen. Why is that? Is there less oxygen available? In some ways, yes. It's spread out. We'll see that in just a second. But you need pressure. The real problem is pressure. Actually, if you go from sea level to the top of Mount Everest, the percentage, the ratio between oxygen and nitrogen stays the same. Now, that was surprising to me. I thought maybe it was, the oxygen percentage went down. It doesn't. In fact, we're told that it's pretty much constant up to about 50,000 feet, over nearly twice as high as Mount Everest. So the real problem here is pressure, driving the oxygen into our lungs. Now, here's a little better, another diagram that kind of illustrates that. At sea level, you can see on the left, the oxygen atoms are in blue, and the nitrogen atoms in green are a little more packed together. They're compressed than at 14,000 feet, like on top of Mount Whitney out in California, the tallest mountain in the continental United States. We started to go up there once, didn't get very far. It was too cold. We went at the wrong time of year. But you can see the oxygen, and the nitrogen molecules both are spread out. They're not pressed together. You still have the same ratio. In this diagram, you can see 10 oxygen at sea level and 30 nitrogen. Whereas at 14,000 feet, you have 6 oxygen and 19 nitrogen. The ratio is about the same, about 24-25%, which is a little higher than it should be. It should be around 21%. But that's the idea. Well, in addition to air density, we have an inverse relationship with blood density. When we're down at sea level and we got nice pressure and plenty of oxygen, the percentage isn't what counts. It's the pressure driving it in that's important. We don't need as many red blood cells. So we can get along with a 14, 15 hemoglobin just fine. But you go up to Lake Titicaca, 14,000 feet, and you want to live up there for any long time. If you go up there suddenly, you're going to be in trouble because you're not getting oxygen to your muscles. You're going to have, stomach cramp. You better go up, take it slow, equilibrate, stabilize, at the 10,000 foot level first and then go on up or something. But after you've been there a while, in the populations that live there all the time at high altitude, they compensate for the less pressure by making more red blood cells. So you have them over here on this side, dense red blood cells, because there's sparse oxygen. And everything works out okay. Now you can have the same amount of saturation because you've got more hemoglobin to do it. This is a condition called polycythemia. So that's compensatory polycythemia at altitude. What happens if you have polycythemia down at sea level? And some people do. It's a disorder, usually from their disorder of their kidneys, maybe not getting enough blood supply, and the kidney says, I must be at high altitude. So they kick out a hormone to make more RBCs, and you got thick blood. You're at higher risk of blood clots. You may have heart failure. It's just hard to push that sludge, that thick blood around. So you drain it off, and there's all kinds of things you can do for that. Now, we measure the saturation. That's the easiest one for us to measure. You can measure the partial pressure of oxygen in blood with special blood gas machines requiring an arterial puncture. Pretty painful. They usually do it down here in the wrist. Feel for the radial pulse. Stick a needle in there. Oh, does that hurt? Or you might try the brachial artery or the femoral artery. It's a bigger one. It's easier to hit. But this is much more convenient. It's pretty painless. And the pulse ox measures the saturation, which is really the important measurement for practical purposes. And you can see in the graph over here, and along the bottom it's roughly 1, 2, 3 minutes. When you stop breathing, you hold your breath, or you get, you're in acute need of a Heimlich maneuver, like we were told happened here once. Wow. We do all right for about up to almost 2 minutes. And then it's all downhill from there, as you can see. So you want to keep breathing. Don't stop breathing. Don't hold your breath too long. I've seen parents go into a panic when their little toddlers go in a tantrum and they hold their breath. Don't sweat it. So they pass out. They'll start breathing again. I don't think they'll pass out anyway. But what's a red blood cell to do if you don't have enough oxygen around and you're in need of oxygen? Well, there's quite a number of things we actually can do. One is to increase your circulation and improve the delivery of the oxygen you have. That's the basis behind aerobic exercise. So we had, what was it, back in the 70s? Oh man, aerobic exercise. Dr. Cooper, remember that? Everybody was buying his books and going out and jogging. And that's good. It's really good. You're going to breathe more. You're going to breathe faster because all that exercise puts an oxygen debt, and you get a signal from your brain saying, hey, come on, we need more oxygen. So you breathe faster and deeper, and you get it sent out to the cells of your body, the muscles particularly. And that's good for a short term. You can't do that forever, though. And we'll see what happens when you do it for a long time and push yourself beyond the benefit range. It can get into more serious oxygen debt and even more trouble. Everybody's got to start somewhere, and beginners might take it easy to begin with, and you want to work yourself up to it, depending on your capabilities. And if you hadn't been exercising a lot, you got to take it slow. So monitor your pulse. Easy place to get it right here. Bang, bang. You can really feel that one. Count it for 15 seconds. Multiply by 4. If it gets more than, what's the rule? Certainly, if it gets 3 times your age, your strike is 3 strikes you're out. Yeah, watch it and get it up there at least twice your age. That'd be good. Shoot for that. And how deep you breathe, even if you're not exercising. I think it's very good for us to take deep breaths. In fact, why do we yawn? We talked about this last night. Haven't been breathing deep enough, and your CO2 levels have gone up, and your brain says, breathe, breathe. And so you take a deep one. That helps. But if we breathe shallow breathing versus deep breathing, notice the difference there. The upper and the lower parts of the lungs and how much oxygenation you get. Now, it looks pretty good over here on the shallow side, but it's only a smaller upper area of the lung that's going to get oxygenated. Down near the bottom of the lung, not so well. And that blood, which didn't get its share of oxygen, is going to get mixed with the other blood that did get oxygenated, and your overall oxygen gets less. It's diluted out. It's called shunting. We've just bypassed the oxygen and not helping the situation. So take some deep breaths. The other advantage of deep breathing every once in a while is to keep those little air sacs open. What happens if the air sacs start to stick together, collapse? 1 or 2 is not a real problem, but if you get a whole bunch of them, it's called atelectasis. And you got even more shunting. There's no oxygen at all going in those sacs. And that can lead to pneumonia eventually. Fluid accumulation, mucus, infections get started. So take a deep breath every chance you get. And when you're moving around and doing that, so that's all the better. Aerobic exercise. There is an ideal balance between no exercise and too much exercise. And let's start with the sedentary lifestyle there. We're not moving very much. There's no demand and no production of free radical scavengers or nitric oxide production, which is a chemical messenger to tell the scavengers to be released. Because you're not doing a whole lot, but even at baseline, we are all producing what's called reactive oxygen species, ROS. These are types of free radicals, and they need to be neutralized before they do damage. If you don't, and in this case you don't have any signal to say we need antioxidants produced, we don't have any peroxidase, catalase, super dimutase, superoxide dimutase. So you end up with moderate oxidative stress. You're worse off sitting there doing nothing, because obligatory, you're going to be producing some, just from metabolism, some of these free radicals all the time. So when we exercise, moderate exercise, that sends a signal. Whoa, okay, everybody get on board here. We're going to need some nitric oxide to dilate the blood vessels so we can get more blood to the muscles, get more oxygen out there. We're going to need some free radical scavengers, antioxidants to take care of all those reactive oxygen species. And the net result is that our oxidative stress goes down. We benefit. That's good. But what happens if we keep doing that? We push ourselves too far, too long. The example there, it says marathon runner. They talk about hitting the wall. I guess beyond that, you just don't feel anything. But there is problems, because now it's to the point where you're developing so many of these free radicals because of anaerobic conditions. You've gotten into oxidative debt beyond which you can supply, and your oxidative stress is actually increased. So that's worse than just sitting around doing nothing as a couch potato. So right in the middle is where you want to be. Now, what can we do to increase our oxygen concentration? Oh, I already told you. We've got two of these at Eden Point, two oxygen concentrators. One's a high pressure one for our hyperbaric oxygen, which is the next item on the agenda here. But oxygen concentrators, the regular ones can go up to about 5 liters a minute. But at that rate, your oxygen concentration won't be as good as if it was down around 2 or 3, 1 or 2 or 3 even. 1 or 2 will have a higher concentration because it can build up that before it has to deliver the volume, so it can concentrate it more. And these are very effective. Before we had Eden Point up here, and we had all of our exercise equipment down at the school area, and the oxygen concentrator was down there, I tried doing both, aerobic exercise and oxygen concentration at the same time. What do we call that? Exercise with oxygen therapy. And you'll see it abbreviated a lot of times, EWOT. And there's a lot of people doing this. This has been quite popular in the last 10 years or so. And you can see they all got some nasal prong. I think the mask is better. You get a rebreathing mask, your concentrations will be higher. And they're doing some type of strenuous exercise. Keep the circulation going, get the high oxygen concentration into the blood. And there's long-lasting benefits from this. There are signals sent to the bone marrow, to the red blood cells, to our hormones that give us sustained oxygen saturation levels long after we finish exercising. It's really an amazing combination of exercise and oxygen at higher concentration. And then the best one yet is to increase the oxygen pressure while you're doing all of that. There's a picture of the hyperbaric chamber that we have. But not everybody's got one. They're a bit expensive. But you can do hyperbaric, self-generated hyperbaric, sort of, kind of. It helps. In the 2009 issue, May 2009 issue of Sleep and Breathing Journal, there's a very nice article that describes the physiologic benefits, and what they've measured happens when people purse their lips. Now, people with lung disease, chronic lung disease, have discovered that they feel better, they can get more oxygen in their system if when they breathe out, they hold their lips tight together and exhale the air against resistance. So you breathe in and real quick, 1 to 2 seconds, and you breathe out over 4, 5, 6 seconds. It's like blowing up a balloon, but you don't have a balloon. Or someone else said it's like blowing out the candles, but there's no candles. Anyway, you have some resistance against that. What does that do? It puts back pressure in our lungs and helps to force the oxygen that you just breathed in, you breathed in and make it under pressure. You're increasing your pressure. It's kind of like a self-made hyperbaric chamber right in yourself. And actually they use this on ventilators. And it's a form of what they call PEEP, positive in expiratory pressure. And so when you're expiring out and you got it under pressure, positive pressure, and during expiration, you're increasing the pressure, and it's helping that force that oxygen in even better than prevailing pressure wherever you're at. We're at about 1,600 feet above sea level here, so our pressure's a little less than at sea level. Nothing like Everest or Aconcagua. So a little lip pursing, pursed lip breathing can help. So this is all about oxygen delivery and carrying capacity. Inside the red blood cells, there's one right there, you've got a certain amount of oxygen. And of course, preferentially, the hemoglobin is designed to soak up that oxygen like a sponge or a magnet that attracts it right to the hemoglobin molecule and it binds to it until it gets to a change in pH, a little more acidic pH environment out at the tissues where it's lost. The metabolism has changed a little bit because oxygen levels start to drop. Then the release of the oxygen from the hemoglobin is increased and the oxygen's delivered. So it doesn't hold on to it forever. And it's a very nice arrangement. You get back up to the lungs, you can soak it up real good. It gets out to the tissues, it lets it go where it needs it. But there's also the ability to instill or carry oxygen in the plasma out here, outside the red cells. And it's due to what's called Henry's law. Gas under pressure, increasing pressure, will increase the solubility of that gas in a fluid, in a liquid. Well, our plasma is mostly water. It's a liquid. And so it has the capacity to carry some additional oxygen. And there's where hyperbaric can go even above 100% saturation. You don't have hemoglobin saturation, now you got plasma saturation in addition. So I can carry even more oxygen. Well, another thing we can do to deliver oxygen to the body is drink ozone water. Or apply ozone to different other cavities in the body. We have a very ill patient this week. We're using some rectal ozone insufflation. And I hope it's not too late. He's pretty serious. So pray for Juan Carlos. But we try to get the ozone in. You can drink it, and it's absorbed right to the stomach wall pretty quickly, within half a minute to a minute. You can measure the pulse ox changing, going up. You can, because ozone is heavier than air, you can put it in the ear, and it will go through the tympanic membrane and actually get some concentrations inside the brain if you need to get ozone, oxygen, oxidative benefit there. So what's ozone? It's concentrated oxygen. Oxygen normally has 2 oxygen atoms. They go around in pairs. It's called diatomic oxygen. And that's what we normally breathe. That's everyday, ordinary, garden variety oxygen. Ozone is a step up. We kick it up a notch. And nature does this. When you have a thunderstorm, lightning, you can smell the ozone in the air. Have you ever been around a copy machine, electrostatic high voltage in the copy machine, you'll smell ozone. Or around those old television sets when you had 30,000 volts of electricity powering those cathode ray tubes, aiming electron streams right at the phosphor screen and generating X-rays in your face. Well, thankfully, we don't have those anymore. But ozone is made from a high voltage electrical charge, and it takes, here it is in nature, you can see that charge splits the normal 2-atom oxygen into singlet oxygen atoms, and then they, under the same electric charge, forces them back together, and then to 2, and then 1 more. Some of those 1s around will force that into a 3 group. If the electrical charge is high enough, and lightning it certainly is, you can get 4, 5, 6, 7 oxygen atoms bound together, and that's called polyatomic ozone. But most of the time we think of it as O3. Now we generate it, and this is not the one we use. Is it going to show it? Here we go. But this is an economical one. You can get it off of Amazon, a bunch of different models. And you bubble the ozone through a glass of water. And the colder the water is, the higher the carrying capacity of the ozone. So we don't want to use real cold water. It's not healthy for the stomach either, but the physics tell us that colder water holds more. But you still get a good dose in regular water. What else can you do to get more oxygen out in the tissues? Eat more beets. Did you know that? Beets, spinach. Let's see, what else? There's one more. That have high nitrates, organic nitrates. And nitrates have been discovered here recently, and everybody's doing it now, putting beet juice and beets into their smoothies. And because of the stimulating effect, within an hour, and I'll show you the response curves in just a second, a minute or two, beet juice will stimulate the release of nitric acid, nitrates, nitric acid, and that causes the blood vessels to dilate. It also improves the binding capacity of oxygen at in hemoglobin. So a lot of people have discovered this, and they're really using it as one of those performance enhancers. What does this say? The boost of beetroot, nitrate max. Oh, there's other ones. What's the another one? They all have, some bunch of them have beet in the name. Beet power. You can get them bars. A bunch of different things. Here is a study that they measured, and you have to do a blood draw to measure these things. So probably have an indwelling catheter, and every hour after a dose of beet juice, about 12 ounces. Four ounces. Well, I'm going to show you the next one. It's a quart over a day. You don't take it all at once. You spread it out. Anyway, at time 0, they had the beet juice, and the other group didn't. One group did, one didn't. They had controls, and then the people that got the beet juice. And they started measuring it. Well, nothing happened at the 30-minute mark, but at the 1 hour mark, you can see their nitrite levels were already higher. And then they really took a jump around the 3 o'clock, 3 hour level, and stayed up for 5 hours or so, and still at the end of 24 hours was higher than controls. So it has a long-lasting benefit. And the sports community has recognized this for some time. Dr. Greger tells us about the Russian athletes who were using beet juice way back. He says they were beating themselves up to run longer and jump farther and all these things in Olympics. Well, this, I don't know if you can see that, the small stuff there. Let's start on the right side. It tells you what the preparation was for this. 7 days of beet juice supplementation in one group, and the other group just got a placebo. They got some red juice. I don't know how they made it taste like beets. That's a pretty characteristic taste. Which is about a liter or a little more than a quart of beet juice a day. Did that for a week. Built up their beet juice capacity and carrying, the effect. Then they did 40 minutes of stressful exercise consisting of repeated 6-second sprints. So you just run as hard as you can, 6 seconds, and then turn around and catch their breath, and then turn around and do it again. They did this for 40 minutes. And they measured their kilojoule capacity. And now, this is on a stationary bike. So the sprints isn't running down the yard. It's sprints on the bike. And they're measuring the oxygen going in. They're measuring the CO2 coming out. They're measuring the workload on the bicycle, which these displays can show you how many kilowatts, kilojoules that you're generating. Well, the people without the beet, they kind of petered out there. They could only get not even 119 joules. But the people that had all the beet on board got up to 123, quite a bit more. Then they'd wait for 15 minutes, take a break, and do it again. And the importance of this one, however, was measuring, they would check their reaction times. At the end of the 40-minute episode, they checked how fast they could respond to signals and event, hit the buzzer, name that tune. And you can see after the first session, the ones without the beet juice, they looked like they did slightly better than the beet people. That's interesting. No, slower. I'm reading that backwards. No, not slower. That's milliseconds. Yeah, they took a few more milliseconds to respond. But after the second 40-minute session, the people with the beet juice actually did slightly better. You see that? Slightly better, a little faster. But the others were really flagging now. They had slowed down. They had just drained them, doing all that heavy endurance, and not having enough oxygen delivery to their brain. Very important part of performance. You can read all about this in, what's the small print there? Dietary nitrate improves sprint performance and cognitive function during prolonged intermittent exercise. European Journal of Applied Physiology, April 7, 2015 issue. So that's just last year. Well, we started out talking about the breath of life. We looked at it in a physical sense now. Breathing is certainly important. So is drinking. Now, I didn't get as much this morning because I knew I was going to have to stand up here for an hour. And when we drink all that lemon juice, all that water every morning, I'm in trouble. if I had to stand up for an hour. So, here's what Job had to say about breathing. All the while my breath is in me, and the Spirit of God is in my nostrils. So what is my breath? Where did the breath come from? The original breath was the Spirit of God, breathed into Adam, the breath of life. That breath has life in it, because the Spirit has life, right? John 33:4, Jesus said, the Spirit of God... I'm sorry, that's Job again. That's not John. This is Job. The Spirit of God hath made me, and the breath of the Almighty has given me life. Well, it's the same thing. Spirit of God, breath. Whoop. Is that thing going to come down every time? Oh, boy. Psalm 33:6. You know this verse. By the word of the Lord were the heavens made, and all the hosts of them by the breath of His mouth. Well, when you speak, the Word speaks. There's breath. It's saying the same thing twice. And Psalm 104, 29-30. Take away their breath, they die. Well, that's the reverse of Genesis 2:7. Put the breath in, it becomes a living soul. You take the breath out, it dies. He's a dead soul. And they return to their dust. You send forth your Spirit, and they are created. The breath and the Spirit. Yeah, it is going to do this every time. Okay. Lost in translation. He gives breath unto the people of the earth, Isaiah 42:5, and spirit to them that walk therein. So the Spirit, the breath. Ezekiel 37:5. This is the valley of the dead bones. Remember that he saw all the dry bones? Them bones, them bones, them dry bones. That's where that song comes from. And he said, I will cause breath to enter into you, and you shall live. This is after the bones had flesh and sinew and muscle and skin, and everything's there. The hardware is now complete, but it's not alive. Until the breath came in, the breath of life, and you shall live. Oh boy, okay. The words that I speak, Jesus says, they are spirit and they are life. See the connection between spirit and life? Jesus breathed on them. I think it's verse 22, 23. Jesus breathed on His disciples and said, receive the Holy Spirit. Whew, the breath of life. We're told that the Spirit is the life of Christ. One more time. Well, it turned out to be only about 45 minutes. Questions? Yes. Ozone insufflation can be done in other places. For example, urinary tract infections. Ozone is a remarkable, has remarkable properties. It is very strongly antimicrobial, antiviral, antifungal. It will kill mold. You can ozonate an area, a room, if you've got mold in there. We're going to do that for the school books. Got to do that, Jason. Okay, we're going to get our ozonator, but we've been using it a lot. So maybe, huh? You do it at night, yeah. I have to do it at night. So we had some difficult, recurrent urinary tract infections. And putting some ozone right into the bladder. These were bladder infections. For about 10 minutes, just all it took. Just instant. Now, you didn't have to take antibiotics for 10 days, 2 weeks. Bang. That was it. Immediately, yeah. And had several opportunities to do that. It works great.
One has even released some stones.
Oh, yeah. Yes. I don't know what happened there. Maybe it stimulated some nitric oxide, something dilated. And she passed some stones. Yeah. So ozone's quite useful in many different areas. We're using ozonated water in your sinus. Is that helping you too, Chris? Yeah. Let's see, what else did we do? We ozonated olive oil. I told the group about that. And we kept it freeze. If you freeze it, it'll last for 10 years, they tell me. How do they determine that? Somebody kept it for 10 years to see if it still worked. But we're freezing it just on that basis. Hopefully it'll last a lot longer. Because it takes a long time to make it. You have to bubble it through olive oil or some kind of, we used olive oil, for about a month, almost a month. We did it over 3 weeks. Got real thick, white, put it in a jar, and we had someone with eczema. And took 2 applications, but it cleared it up within 2 days. So that's amazing stuff. Know anybody that's got psoriasis? Try to get TJ up here. Try his psoriasis out on ozonated olive oil. Let's see, what else can we talk about? Oxygen. Oxygen's good stuff. You need a prescription. If you're going to get an oxygen bottle, you have to get a doctor's prescription. You can use, if you're careful, and if the supplier of industrial oxygen, like for welding, also supplies medical grade oxygen, and they use the same equipment, many sources tell us that that's just as good. But that's not always the case, and you don't want to expose yourself to other potential gases that could be in it. It's not as refined.
I was going to say you can get oxygen, not ozone, but oxygen food sources like dark green leafy vegetables.
Yes, well, chlorophyll is also helpful in improving oxygen delivery and carrying capacity in the blood. We showed in class and mentioned here, I'm sure, the chlorophyll and hemoglobin molecules are near exactly the same, just the magnesium and iron, it's the difference. So chlorophyll is a step up. Boy, you can help if you got anemia, it helps to correct anemias. And it has been used in animal studies as a substitute for blood transfusions. Can use it for carrying oxygen, I've been told.